Today's lesson is going to focus back on the two special types of lines we talked about a little bit earlier in the chapter. Most specifically, we're going to talk about horizontal lines and about vertical lines. Now, we should remember that in describing slope, we came up with four different ways of describing slope. We said that a line that goes up left to right. So I'm just going to draw a little coordinate plane off in the margins here. You're not going to need to have to do this. Okay, but if we have a line that goes up from left to right, that's going to be a positive slope. If we have a line that goes down from left to right, we know that's going to be a negative slope. Okay, so we have those. And I'm just going to erase all that because I want to focus on the lines that are horizontal and vertical. So here's our coordinate plane again. There's my x-axis. Oops, there's my x-axis and my y-axis. Now, if we have a horizontal line, here's my horizontal line, we should remember that that has a slope we describe as 0. And for that matter, the slope, the value of it is 0. And likewise for a vertical line, like so, the slope is undefined. And if we were figuring out m, we would also use that word. I know I'm writing a little small here, undefined. Okay, so think about those two lines conceptually. A horizontal line, we should recognize, runs parallel to one of the axes. It actually runs parallel to the x-axis. It's just some number of spaces above or below the origins, unless it is the axis itself. And a vertical line, we should be able to recognize, runs parallel to the y-axis. And it's going to run through the y-axis as a result. Okay, so that just conceptually, that's really important for us to keep in mind. So when it comes to graphing vertical and horizontal lines, or for that matter, writing the equations for vertical and horizontal lines, we just want to make sure which way the line is running and also what axis it's going to run through. So everything we need to know about horizontal lines is actually just detailed right here. So a horizontal line, it takes on the form of an equation of y equals b. Now we know what b is. Don't forget, b stands for the y-intercept. So y equals some value, which happens to be known as the y-intercept. That's what I'm talking about right there. So think about that. You have a line, it's running horizontally. It's running horizontally. It's bound to run through the y-axis. And as a result, it's going to have a y-axis. That value where it cuts through the y-axis is actually going to be what makes up the value of our equation. So if I'm working from an equation, I see y equals -3. Now, first of all, you notice there's no x here. If I see just y all by itself, just as the structure of a horizontal line, the structure of an equation or of a horizontal line says, if it just says y equals a number, it means it's a telltale sign it's a horizontal line. There's no x variable here. We lose the slantedness. We lose the upward or the downward slope because we're not going through both the y and the x-axis. So by saying y equals -3, we're saying that we have a line that is going through the y-axis, at -3. So I can plot that point on the y-axis at -3, and I just need to know that because it says y equals, that there's no x, it's going to cut through the y-axis, and therefore the only way I can have that line is to have a horizontal line running through at that point. And that's all that there is to it. It seems a lot more complicated, but it's actually quite simple. So just to really simplify things down, if I have a horizontal line, it's going to be recognized by an equation that has y only, no x. Y equals some number. As such, the equation is going to tell me that it's going to be a line that runs through the y-axis at that given value, So I'm going to have a line that runs only through the y-axis, in this case at +6. So I can plot that point at +6, and now I can run my horizontal line directly through that point, and we're done. So if we move on, we can think intuitively that a vertical line is going to be precisely the same type of thing, but in this case, we're going to be missing the y variable. In this case, we're only going to have the x variable, and it's going to be equal to some value known as a. Now, that's really nothing more than saying some value, something other than the b value that we have already. Now, think about that. If there's a variable missing, it can't have a slant. In this case, if y is missing, if we don't have both variables, then my line can't be slanted because it's not going to go through both x and y. So if y equals is horizontal, then x equals is vertical. And it will go through the x-axis at the value stated in the equation. So if I have an equation that says x equals 8, I should realize it's a vertical line. Whoop. And actually, I don't like this because I don't have the space to do it. I'll tell you what, let's change this to x equals 3. Okay, I'm going to plot my point on the x-axis, knowing that's a vertical line, so the only axis it can run through is the x-axis. I'm going to plot my point on the x-axis at +3. And then I'm going to run my line. Oops. It's not the straightest line in the world. Now remember, you're using a ruler. I am not using a ruler when I'm trying to do my sketching. Okay, so I'm going to try to run this line as straight as I can through +3. We change that equation from x equals 8 to x equals 3, and then we're done. So I hope this makes sense that if I see an equation that says x equals a number, it's a vertical line. That's my telltale sign right there. Find that value on the x-axis. Since it's a vertical line, it must go through the vertical axis at that value. So find -5 on the x-axis, plot that point, and graph your line. Graph your vertical line specifically, and you are done. So it took me almost 8 minutes to explain what should be a very simple concept, that when you see an equation that has y in it, y equals a number, it will be a horizontal line. So graph that horizontal line through the value that the equation says, through the y-axis for that given value. And when the equation says x equals a number, where only x is in the equation, there's no y, that's going to be a vertical line that crosses to the x-axis at the given value of the equation. So that's everything you need to know about vertical and horizontal lines. There are some problems on the back I want you to do, so complete those. We will check in class, and we'll continue our review with graphing vertical and horizontal lines then.